Hi, everybody. My name is Don. Thanks for being here today for our final program or final event of the Light Matter Film Festival 2025. This is an exciting event to have Jude Abu Zaineh here with us today and to present her work. This is also, I think, maybe, I don't know if it's the first, but a collaboration with the Institute for Electronic Arts in some ways. Jude is going to be on campus for the next 2 weeks, working at the IEA. So she'll be around for students and others and whatever. So for those of you around, go see what she's up to. Jude is a Palestinian-Canadian artist, interdisciplinary artist working across art, food, science, and technology studies. Her work develops counter-archive practices and investigates themes of culture, displacement, storytelling, diaspora, and belonging through de-colonial and feminist perspectives. She examines ideas of home and community influenced by her childhood and upbringing in Southwest Asia. Jude received an MFA from University of Windsor and recently-ish finished her PhD in interdisciplinary arts from Rensselaer Polytechnic RPI in Troy, where she still is currently based. So with that, again, one other thing. There is a omnibus film submission that would be sort of connected to the kind of thinking around this practice that I meant to announce. There's little pamphlets on the back. It's for 10-second film submissions for like films from around the world, sort of engaging with political questions. So that was from the artist Mark Street, who was here for the festival this weekend. So do check that out in the back. I meant to give an announcement for that with a slightly larger audience for the talk. So anyway, with that aside, thank you again for being here, and let's welcome Jude Abu Zaineh.
Hi everyone. I'm Jude Abu Zaineh. Let me just figure out where to put my water. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, cool. I feel like this is a nice, intimate, rainy, gloomy Sunday crowd. So I think we can just be chill about this. If you have questions, if you have thoughts or anything that you want to chat about at the end of this, I'll be around, but also as James said, I'll be around for the next 2 weeks on campus. It's my first time here in Alfred and at Alfred University. So yeah, I'm excited to meet everyone and spend some time on campus and see what weird things I come up with along the way. So please come visit the IEA studio wherever it is. So I thought it would be nice for me to walk you through some of my interdisciplinary practice. I work across a lot of different media. As a Palestinian, my identity is very politicized, as you can imagine. My work has always been rooted in the themes of culture, identity, placemaking, belonging, especially as someone who is an exiled Palestinian and has had to reconcile with their identity through all the different geographies and places that I've lived in spaces that I've inhabited. And so I tend to work with food quite a bit, and you'll see that come up through my practice and in some of the clips and videos that I'll show. I thought in the context of being here at Light Matter and at Alfred that I would focus on some of my moving images and my expanded media works. But I wanted to walk you through some of the process of how I arrived at these moving images. So pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, there was a really large component in my studio that was based in social engagement, relational aesthetics, and really about bringing people together. And what better and easier way to do that than over food? And so I would spend a lot of time cooking and prepping traditional Palestinian foods and invite people to these elaborate dinners or lunches. I've been doing this more seriously in my professional studio practice since about 2017 or so. It's been an ongoing, progressing element of my studio work. And so here you can see, I also try to present these interventions in institutional spaces that tend to be cold, sterile, white in every sense, as this big family table. I really think about the dinner table as a site for alternate discussion and also a very political space to talk about alternate realities, politics, culture in all forms, and especially in the context of bringing Palestinian food to the table. Sometimes it means people are experiencing these foods for the first time, or they find different connection points between their respective cultures as entry points to make sense of the foods that they're consuming, or it becomes a very nostalgic experience. This particular food reminds me of something that my grandma used to make, or it smells like something that I remember my mom cooking in the kitchen, so on and so forth. I've been working with mahouba, which is a traditional Palestinian dish. Us Arabs are very literal. Mahouba quite literally means upside down. And so this food gets its namesake because it's cooked in a giant pot. There's different layers of ingredients depending on the region in Palestine or the different household or just personal taste. You'll use different ingredients, but traditionally it's made with layers of sliced potato, tomato. I'm also kind of hungry right now. So my favorite way to make it is with fried cauliflower and some red meat, and then it's all packed together with spiced rice. Everything is cooked in this giant pot, and then once it's done cooking, you flip it upside down, hence mahouba, and then you take the pot off, and you're left with this very sculptural domed rice dish. And you can see all of these different layers of the different ingredients. It feels very architectural and it's very ceremonial. One of the reasons why I love making mahouba as the central or main component of these dinners is because mahouba at its core is meant for communal consumption. You rarely ever would make it for individual eating. And it is very ceremonial. So you make it for someone's birthday, or all of you are coming to visit me from out of town. And so I want to be this amazing host and I want to cook this elaborate, spectacular dish for you. And so the dinner table becomes this site for gathering and site for discussion. I leave my guests with recipe cards to make mahouba, and it becomes another opportunity to resist and persist against cultural erasure for Palestinians. You are now bestowed with this family recipe. This particular recipe is passed down to me from my grandma, to my mom, to me. Each one of us, of course, has their own little way of making this particular food. If my grandma was to making mahouba, she's a bit more heavy-handed with cinnamon. If I'm to making mahouba, I'm more heavy-handed with cardamom. So it also varies from person to person, despite using the same recipe. That there's something really poetic about that. But I also think about this corroboration of intergenerational knowledge and keeping culture alive in all its forms. The leftovers from all of these dinners make their way into petri dishes that I document the growth and decay over time. Really thinking about the evolution of culture, again, capital C culture and lower C culture. I spent a lot of time working in the space of bioart, which is the intersection of art, science, and tech. Spending a lot of time in these sterile labs is also quite interesting as someone who is not a scientist. I'm an artist first and foremost, but I think I cosplay as a scientist quite a bit. But it also means I get to go into these spaces that are meant to be used in very specific ways, and tools that are meant to be used in very specific ways, and I get to go in and just play and experiment and do things not the right way, which is really funny when you're in a room with these straight-laced scientists and their polished white lab coats, and you get to go in and just mess up their lab tables. It's really fun. You should all try it out sometime. And so these petri dishes then become the source material for all the videos and a lot of these larger installations that you see. I play with the leftovers, as I mentioned. I'll scrape all the plates from all of my guests. And so if you're a guest at one of my dinners, you also become corroborated in the artwork itself. And it becomes this like really cyclical way of involving people in all of the works that I'm making. Here I'm referencing Robert Indiana's Love, thinking about ideals of home, the evolution of home, the destruction of home under the threat of occupation and apartheid, a colonial state. So you can see also how these petri dishes are evolving over time. I play with patterning and repetition quite a bit. Again, thinking about this idea of storytelling and narration and maintaining cultural legacy through the act of consistent telling and retelling of stories and histories and those kinds of important cultural emblems like recipes and folklore tables, etc. And so then these particular images and objects start to make their way into larger installations. Here you can see I have a repeated wallpaper that is in conversation with the petri dishes to the wall. And then I'm able to take these still images and animate them. So they start to reflect and refract onto themselves. I'm calling onto the aesthetic qualities of Islamic art, of sacred geometry, really pulling into the aesthetics of the patternings of the things that I grew up seeing in my home, around town, in the Arab region. So I'm able to print these patterns on a lot of different materials. That's one of the things that I want to experiment with while I'm here doing my residency at Arte. And then I can become really expansive with it. And this is where the videos start to come into play. The source material for all of these installations that you'll see is the manuba. So everything that you're seeing is quite literally, you're being engulfed by the culture, by the foods, by the histories, by the recipes and the sort of oral knowledge that's being passed on through generations and generations. Here I was able to do an installation where I was in a 360 screen. And this was a really exciting moment for my work because as audiences were entering, they were quite literally engulfed by the scale of these microbial beings, these organisms, the rice grains that when we encounter them in our plates are so small, but it becomes this massive, larger than life experience. I also really call to the nomadic transient lifestyle that a lot of exiled Palestinians face. So you'll usually see that in the patternings of the textiles that I bring into these installations, I'm calling to a Bedouin tent or suggesting a Bedouin tent in some way through these drapings. And I wanted to show you some of these still images of a 360 because I will play the panoramic 360 video for you, but just to get a sense of how there's certain moments within the multi-channels of the video that's playing where some things are on, some things are off. Scale, again, is really important because I'm always calling to the enormity of the calamity of what the Palestinian experience is. This is the 360 video.
She's ready.
هاي لا تبازلها خروف فين؟ خروف
الدولار تقبل بالورق؟
لا بيرفعش الدولار شوف
جايب معاي حوالي 81 دولار كلهم فاضة من الكويت. سلمناهم للبنك. خلاص سلمناهم.
لذيذ إزر قرع هذا ولا إزر؟
بطيخ.
إزر بطيخ. بطيخ أصفر ولا بطيخ أحمر؟
شو باين عليه؟ يا عدل يا عدل.
وبعدين؟
لا هذه بدها جبل الثوبان.
لا هذا البحر. والبحر يموج وبيريس.
لا لا الموجة تجري ورا الموجة.
لا في جمال لوديع الصح؟
الموجة تجري ورا الموجة. هنا الأغاني نحن
بحر يا دوار يا كاتم الأسرار بيني وبينك سهر ودروب
مين العرايس دول مالهم حدانا
وعليل ماء مربدة بالزيوت وأما الأشجار
انت وانا شقينا وضاعت ليالينا
بدك ضلك تصور يعني بدك تاكل؟ والله هو مندي لازم يعود. اعطى شيء بيشتغل. نعم. من غير ما تعرف. المفروض تعرف من غير ما اقول لك.
هذول الكبار.
يعني من يوم ما اجيت هلا صورت سنتين بس.
زيادة بختصر البي
لا.
طب الكاميرا تبعتك بتكبر كاسات الشاي ولا لا؟ نكبر كاسة الشاي على اساس نفرجي؟ لا نفرجي الحاج انه كوباية الشاي تبعتنا كبيرة.
مين جابهم خديجة؟ كوبايات جابت لي جابت لي 6 وبعدين جابت لي كمان 4 صاروا 10 يعني 10. ما انكسر منهم شيء وهيك كسرتيهم ارميهم على الارض يمكن مناسبة من هالمناسبات ما انكسروش.
ايه البلا حبيبي تعال صورك. صورتش انت على البيسة تعال.
ذكي.
تعرف على هالقعدة هذه ألذ شيء الشاي.
والله.
والصفيحة هذه.
لا.
عن ناشف أخوي. بليناها بشوية شاي. يعني هل منها بالله؟
لا بنفعش.
ما يقول له موتين.
صحيح.
موت وهو شبعان أحسن ما يكون جوعان ومريض.
صح. هي الصفيحة. ثانية.
شوف العصافير.
صور الكرشات ولا الفوارغ ولا ورق ولا الكبش المنوم.
هاي لازبازيلا.
خروفين.
I wanted to show you this so that you can get a sense of some of the things that also drive my interest and my research. You're obviously not experiencing this at its full scale and how it was conceived and that it was meant to be consumed through this 360 experience. But I want you to imagine if you were in this space, how disorienting it is. That when you're engulfed in this 360 screen, you have different images or different channels popping up at different intervals and in different parts of the screen where you're constantly having to turn around. You're sat right in the center. And I'm really just calling to the disorienting experience of belonging and not belonging to more than one place, constantly having to look over your shoulder, and in a way choreographing my audience intentionally to have to also physically embody that space. That's a really important element to the things that I do when I'm playing with scale or thinking strategically about placement of objects or whatever it is that I'm working with. I'm thinking quite intentionally about how I'm trying to choreograph any of my spectators' physical movement throughout the space. So you'll see that that also happens a lot through the scale of how I work. When I'm obviously working in a petri dish, it's quite small. You have to get up close and personal to maybe absorb some of the intricate details that are occurring within the object. But then in these larger than life, these massive scaled videos or installations are also being encapsulated by the work itself. So there's constant movement or back and forth or push-pull that's happening. I was also very deliberate in pulling on this, the media archives and the archaeology of my family's heirlooms of photographs and home recorded videos, and that I wanted to pull on clips and scenes where there's a lot of communal gathering around food, celebrating of some sort, but there's joy that's occurring in a lot of these videos, and food is a central component. I was deliberate in curating these videos this way because, again, I'm pushing back against the narratives that we're constantly seeing, especially in like Western mainstream media, towards what or who a Palestinian is, and really trying to define and resist these really gross, egregious stereotypes that exist about us. And so this is my form of resistance in some way. I wanted to extract a couple clips and show them in large form. They're just a few seconds, just so you can get a sense of sort of the domesticity, the normalcy of life, but also in some of the conversations that will come up. There's one that comes up later with my grandpa who is talking about just casually, he's cracking on some pumpkin seeds and just making a passing quip or joke about how he lost all his money in this moment of the exodus, of the Nakba and the exile, just like a random throwaway. And so the violence and the treachery of these experiences are still quite present, despite my deliberate curation or editing to only include certain kinds of clips. The conversations really carry the enormity of the violence and history through all the work. And then if you see, if you recall in 360 video, there's obviously a lot of layering, where you're seeing the manuba kaleidoscopic patterns coming up against these archival videos. There's an aesthetic quality that at very base level, it feels, okay, this is cute, this is attractive, but upon knowing that this is actually growing and decaying and rotting food, it is quite violent and it is quite gross. Those are the kinds of tensions that I'm constantly trying to pull within the work that I'm presenting. So this is one of the clips that you saw.
بحر الهوى غطاء والخطوة في هذا لا
تقدر تصور يعني بدك تاكل؟
والله هو بدي لازم يعود هذا شيء بيشتغل انا
كويس
من غير ما تعرف المفروض تعرف من غير ما اقول لك هذول الكبار
يعني من يوم ما اجيت هلا صورت سنتين بس
زيادة بختصر البي
لا
طب الكاميرا تبعتك بتكبر كاسات الشاي ولا لا؟ نكبر كاسة الشاي على اساس نفرجي؟ لا نفرجي الحاج انه كوباية الشاي تبعتنا كبيرة.
مين جابهم خديجة؟ كوبايات؟ جابت لي يلا جابت لي 6 بعدين جابت لي كمان 4 صاروا 10 يعني ما انكسر منهم شيء ويمكن كسرتيهم ارميهم على الارض يمكن مناسبة من هالمناسبات ما كسروش.
لا ما بينفعش الدولار شوف
جايب معاي حوالي $81 كلهم فاضة من الكويت. سلمناهم للبنك. خلاص سلمناهم.
لذيذ إذا قرع هذا ولا إذا
هو بطيخ.
إذا بطيخ أصفر ولا بطيخ أحمر؟
يبين عليه.
And then I wanted to show you another example of how my videos kind of work in this expanded media field. This is an exhibition, I Will to the Skies, that's currently on view in Halifax in Canada. I don't know if any of you will make it to Halifax, but it's up until I think November 16th, if you happen to make it up there for whatever random reason. And so you can see again, I'm pulling back to and recalling to this aesthetic patterning, the repetition over and over again. In the far back, you can see the same repetition with the home, the quadrant petri dishes, this wallpaper. At a distance, it just looks like an appealing wallpaper that you might find in, I don't know, maybe a bougie hotel room or your rich aunt's bathroom or something. But upon closer inspection, you'll see that it reveals home in this decaying form. Sometimes people think they're maggots. Sometimes they don't realize what they're looking at, but I think that there's something really interesting in this moment of discovery for others. I also do a lot of work with neon, so that's a different conversation outside of Life Matter Film Fest, but had to sneak in some neon into this work. And then you can see that I've embedded some of these clips and some of these videos that you've seen within this previous installation at MPAC into this work. And I've made it a point to add in some of these, I'm not really sure what to call these vestibules, but some of them are completely encased. And in the one that's in the far back here, I hit a larger CRT TV in there, and it becomes another moment of discovery for audiences or viewers, depending on how much time they're spending in the installation or in the space, where they can discover some of these food-based videos and these moments of gathering joy. And then, of course, the patternings from the petri dishes also make their way into a lot of the different parts within the installation. And then it's important for me to always bring the food back quite literally into the space. So I was able to also host a Mahiba intervention dinner within the installation itself, within the exhibition itself, which was quite impactful. Because a lot of these institutions are never really used this way as a space for, again, I just really think about them as these very sterile, Eurocentric spaces that the conversation has shifted in the last few years, but historically and predominantly prioritize a certain narrative or a certain voice. So I think that these moments are quite transformative, not just for me selfishly, but for everyone that gets to come and experience these things. And then, of course, this kind of opens up the can of worms of how cyclically I work, so that this just will evolve into the next thing, and so on and so forth. But I think this is a good spot to leave it at, because also I'm really hungry and I'm sure you all are too. So let's feast, and hopefully I'll see you all around campus in the next 2 weeks. Thank you for having me.